From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We're joined as always with our super producer, Paul Mission Control Decant. Most importantly, you are here. That makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. Weird question came up a little bit a few weeks ago. We were looking at episodes we wanted to cover, and it hit us. We have never talked about the Templars. For guys who love so much weird fiction and conspiracy, it's kind of strange we never got to this one.
We did do an episode on the book Holy Grail, Holy Blood, which I think is a very popular, kind of in conspiracy circles, book about the origins of the Knights Templar. I believe we interviewed the daughter of the man who wrote it. That's right. Yeah. But I do believe that might well have covered it, and that was a little bit of a different type of episode. But this topic is such red meat for people that are interested in this kind of stuff.
Well, and we've covered the Order of Malta or the Knights of Malta, or they have so many names.
They have great passports.
Yeah, still. And we covered that in video. So if you want to check that out, head over to the YouTube channel.
Yeah, and today, the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, that's their whole name, they're often kind of thought of as legends. You guys, it reminded me of my favorite Indiana Jones film, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where there's that cool, spoiler, there's that cool chase scene, and at the very end, Indiana makes sudden friends with this guy who was trying to kill him, 3 minutes
He's just
earlier.
such a charmer. You know?
Yeah, and he shows a cool tattoo, and he says, "Ask yourself, why do you seek the cup of Christ? Is it for his glory or for yours?" And that's a direct reference to the Knights Templar. That's an English adaptation of their motto.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they're not around now. Well, they're officially not around now, but they're the subject of numerous conspiracies in the modern day. Here are the facts. Maybe we start with what we know for sure, because the history is really surprising.
Yeah, it's super cool to look into the history, because often you're going to find the history as written by not necessarily the Knights Templar, but maybe the descendants of other orders that came from the Knights Templar, or that were gifted lands and other materials from the Knights Templar. When you see third-party history, it does seem to verge a little bit, or maybe there's more context, right? Mm-hmm. When it's not being written by the order themselves.
Yeah.
But it is a weird thing, because the Knights Templar officially, as we're going to learn, went away. So it is, I don't know. It's just very strange. But let's just talk about how they were formed, why they were formed. They were a military order, like a protecting order, specifically for pilgrims who were generally from, areas in England or, surrounding areas like that. They were headed towards Jerusalem.
Yeah. They're warrior monks, essentially, when they first start off. They are a religious-based military order, so they're kind of like a paramilitary. They're kind of like a private group of mercenaries who happen to agree with the state powers and state religion of the day. And they formed during the Crusades, a series of religious wars starting between 1095 and 1099, so very late into the 11th century. And like you said, Matt, these folks were part of a larger phenomenon in Western Europe, wherein the Christian forces said they were going to stop the spread of Islam and the expansion of Muslim powers. You can see all sorts of heavily romanticized depictions of these crusades in all sorts of social media. I recently rewatched the beginning of Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. You guys remember that one? Those first 10 minutes slap.
You know what I rewatched the beginning of last night?
Mennonites.
Yes, sir. In honor of Richard Lewis, R.I.P. But they take very parallel paths. Both discuss the Crusades, just one a little more ridiculously than the other. But yeah, no, that movie, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, was a big one for me growing up as well.
But the actual Crusades, as you
Terrible.
said, Ben,
Not good.
Yeah,
Not good.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Terrible,
nope,
terrible.
not good. Yeah.
Heavily romanticized, but dang, just so much death.
The very
and,
definition of a holy war, right? I mean, waging a holy war to eradicate a faith that contradicts your own.
Individual and collective acts of, in my opinion, pure evil, of just wanton destruction and violence in the name of good and God.
Yeah. It's what we would call total war. Like civilians were considered combatants because of their religions.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable. But you have to believe
totally
it, folks.
believable.
Yeah, right. Humans humaning. The Crusaders, though, it was kind of like our earlier conversation about calling something the Department of Defense when it proactively does bad things. So the Crusaders said, we're a protective force. We're reclaiming land for our spiritual beliefs. But despite the fact that they said they were against Muslim expansion, they actively also sought to expand the rule of Christianity in other non-related areas.
Kind of makes Batman's nickname hit a little different, doesn't it?
The Dark Knight?
The Caped Crusader.
Oh, the Caped Crusader.
Oh,
that's right.
interesting.
I just never really thought about the context of that word before. I guess it has gone on to maybe mean more like someone who's trying to right wrongs or whatever, but it was sure very specifically branded around these exact specific crusades.
Yeah, and a lot of that is sort of the feedback loop of romanticizing history, which is written by the victors, So to your point, Matt, about people writing with the benefit of retrospect, especially when they're, as we'll see, when they're writing about people who are not around. Like if you don't want someone to be able to share their side of the story or defend themselves, then you just don't have them in the conversation. And that's kind of what happens with the Templars, because it's an easier, we'll get into it. But morals and ethics aside, the idea of the Crusade sounds like a lot of work.
It does. I think we have to continue to stress here, one of the primary goals in these Crusades is to recapture places, like specific locations that includes, let's say a castle or a religious site or a place that's known to have artifacts of historical or religious significance, taking those places back or defending those places.
Nice. Yeah. Great point. And good setup too, because we're talking about the Levant, right? The Holy Land, sites in that area or sites that would be of strategic interest between Europe or between Rome and Jerusalem. So Bethlehem, Temple Mount, all the hits, all the good ones. And a lot of the people who served in the Crusades or participated in them from the Western side, they were working for blood and treasure, and they were also working through what they saw as a spiritual impetus. It was your get out of hell free card. So just like, if you have some bad stuff in your past and you join the French Foreign Legion, which I promise I'll stop referencing at some point.
Please don't. Ever. Stop.
That's very kind.
Can I also say the get out of hell free card is my favorite Monopoly play?
Yeah, it's a very intense version of Monopoly from the original Landlord's game. But the idea was, no matter what kind of horrible stuff you did back home, if you were fighting with righteous cause, then all would be forgiven. And that was kind of the pitch that the powers that be made to nobles, to knights, to peasants, to pilgrims. Pope Urban II had launched the first crusade in, what do we say, like 1095, 1099, around there. And as you can tell, there were multiple crusades or multiple waves of this phenomenon because the fighting went back and forth,
I mean, the whole get out of hell free card aspect of it is just such a sickening paradox, because it essentially empowered folks to feel righteous in their rapings and pillagings and, stealing outright of other people's properties and livelihoods.
Yeah. Guys, before we get into this, I have a misunderstanding here. I was looking a lot at some of the other orders. One that you're mentioning here, Ben, the Hospitallers or Hospitallers. I don't know exactly how to say it. It's the group that was around for a long time, ended up becoming what we know as the Knights of Malta or the Order of Malta. They've got a crazy name too. The Sovereign Military Hospitaller Order of St. John of Jerusalem, of Rhodes, and of Malta.
How many of other things can he be of?
But that group, in order to gain like the upper levels and some of the like the knighthood essentially in those or in that organization and the organizations that came before it, you had to be of noble descent and you had to prove nobility, which is a really interesting thing to me when we're talking about these crusades, right? It's trying to get as much support as you can, get as many fighting men at the time as you can, but you're also being led by people of the upper crust of society who are actual knights.
Kind of like World War I.
Is it? How is it? Tell me about that, because I don't know.
So officer class, at least for the British in World War I, was often going to be people who were born from the higher end of the socioeconomic spectrum.
Wow.
Because similar to the Crusades, it was seen as an ideological, a spiritual conflict. And also democracy, famously not really a thing.
Yeah, put the important people on the ridge overlooking the battlefield.
Right.
And I guess my question too has been, was there a traditional warfare aspect to this? Like,
absolutely.
There was, there was like a battlefield and like a front line. So it wasn't literally just people swinging swords at peasants. There were folks defending their faith against the incoming crusaders.
There were folks defending. There were tons of what we would call war crimes because, every war is a grab for resources, right? And you can paint it however you wish. You can believe in different ideologies. But
opportunistic, right?
Yeah, they were definitely hitting what we would call peasant villages or coming in and saying, whatever evil we do is in the service of this greater good. We've got our get out of hell free card, so even if we die in the pursuit, it's okay.
I get all that. I guess my question is, who were they fighting against who maybe were actually somewhat up to the task?
Then those would be military forces of on the side of Islam.
Got it. Yeah, that's what I picture. Yep.
Different like caliphates and empires or warlords, but then also anybody they thought wasn't Christian. And I love that we're pointing out the different religious orders because the Templars weren't the only ones. The Hospitallers weren't the only ones. There were multiple orders of knights still doing that same hierarchical nobility kind of thing. And they each had their own area of focus or like their spin on the belief system or their expertise. And in the beginning, the Templars were a pretty small group. The Crusades have already been happening when these guys come into play in like 1119 Common Era. We're talking such a small group, like such a small rap crew size. It's like 8 or 9 dudes. They're all French knights, and they say we are going to be a defensive force. We're going to protect all these pilgrims traveling to Jerusalem because, as we'll see, travel was dicey at the time, and so
they were almost like a escort, like kind of, right?
Like a very evil AAA.
Gotcha. Hey, hitting home for me, guys. Yeah. Peek behind the curtain, waiting on AAA currently.
So they also had very interesting real estate. They were given quarters near the Temple Mount of Jerusalem. And that's where their name comes from, the Knights Templar, or their street name, because their other name is just too long to keep saying. And they had these vows. They had a thing like a manifesto called the Templar Rule, capital R. And the Templar Rule would become darkly hilarious and ironic over time because it included things like vows of chastity and vows of poverty, and then really specific rules for how they had to fight wars. And their entire lives were very closely regimented, like even unto how they could dress or when and what they could eat. Like there were two guys had to share one bowl. They got meat every other day. It's
really similar to Cistercian living, or it's spelled Cistercian. So like monastic guidance and rules, and it's specifically in that poverty, and where basically and chastity, but all you're doing is work. And it's not, at the time, it's not like you're getting paid a bunch of money for that work, right? You are just doing that work because you were called to do that work, and it is your duty, essentially.
And these guys were almost like heavily armed monks, right? Like, I mean, super devout and evangelical, I guess, for lack of a better term, where they really took this stuff, every aspect of it to the letter, very, very seriously.
Yeah, they all took it very seriously, we believe, especially, or at least in the beginning, and about 10%, at its height, about 10% of the total population of the Templars were actual warrior monks again. And that sounds like a very small number, but we have to remember, like in modern militaries, even today, the bulk of the people working there are infrastructure. You know what I mean? You can't have, it's difficult, I should say, to have 100% of your people be that forward line, you know, because it takes a lot to build that line in the first place.
Can I just say my favorite Diablo 3 character I ever made was a monk, and was like a warrior monk, and I just loved that concept.
Yeah, that's cool.
Someone that doesn't do anything but meditates and then kicks butt with their fists.
Moves like the wind.
My gosh, yes.
I love it too. I've always wanted to play a monk in some role-playing games, but they're often, at least in the D&D universe, they're super underpowered, which is sad. They should be Bruce Lee, right? They should be the most powerful.
I forget the name of the class, but in Elden Ring, which I admittedly never finished, I was the kind of cleric, I guess, that had like almost like a blind swordsman kind of vibe, like had like a thing. And I really love that vibe too, because that implies like, I don't need no eyes. I got the eyes of God working on my side, you know?
That's the incantation class, right?
I believe that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a high dex class that had these claws. It was so awesome.
Oh man, Elden Ring is so
We're
cool.
not nerds. Elden Ring, I need to revisit it. I did that dumb thing where I got to a place where I just wasn't powered up enough to compete,
and you couldn't go back.
It frustrated me so much that I just gave up. But boy, am I kicking butt at Skyrim now, guys. A 10-year-old game that compared to Elden Ring is like a walk in the park. But
it's a 10-year-old. Yeah. It's a 10-year-old game you can play for 10 years.
Dude, it's unbelievably modern feeling. The only thing that sets it, makes it feel older is sometimes the character facial movements. That's it. The what's the word? Environments are unbelievably immersive. I'm in Winterhold now. I just joined the college. Anyway, sorry, we're nerds.
No, safe travels, man. Also, I'll turn on Skyrim just to walk around.
Exactly.
With
so
no
relaxing.
mission. But so these guys, the Templars, they have this amazing real estate. They're pretty hardcore about their beliefs, and they are very, very popular with the Christian powers that be, the power structure of the time. And a lot of it, weirdly enough, goes down to a very good promotional campaign. All right. Propaganda. I'm making it sound nicer than it is. A co-founder of the group is a guy named, pardon the French here, Bernard de Clairvaux. And Clairvaux is a French monk. He later achieves sainthood. He's canonized. He becomes the patron saint of, to your point, Matt, Cistercians?
I don't know. I saw it as Cistercians, but
Cistercians makes more sense. Yeah.
Like crustaceans.
Yeah, I got to kick it with more monks. So he's also the patron saint of beekeepers and candle makers, several specific locations, and of course the Knights Templar. This dude is so good at marketing. He is very successful at making Templar membership the thing to do for the noble class.
Ah, okay. So you're a noble and you want to be a knight. You got to do this, man.
Yeah, it's the hot move, right? And so Hospitallers and Templars, for a minute, they have kind of a Pepsi Coke rivalry with membership. They kind of have like a Princeton Yale thing going on, but because this guy is so successful at this, and partially due to social pressures at the time, the way inheritance works in these landholding families, because of all these factors, Templar membership explodes. It grows very quickly over the next 200 years, which is a long time. They become an international private fighting force, and much, much more than that.
Dude. Yeah, a private fighting force that has loads of money.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, okay, so if you look at Cistercian living, like right now in 2024, there are still a lot of monks. Like I said, one way to describe them, who live in monasteries, and those monasteries make money. Not the monks themselves, but the monasteries make money by doing things like growing fruit and wheat to make, let's say, a fruit cake or something that they sell, which is common. Or back in the day, brewing beer, which would then be sold, right? So like the monastery itself, the organization ends up making a lot of money, but usually that doesn't transfer to on an individual level because of the vows that are taken, because of the way it's set up.
Like, pays for upkeep and such, and goes back into the organization, I guess, to a degree, and probably enriches higher ups, up the chain.
But it's different with the Templars.
Yeah. In the beginning, they're supposed to be individually impoverished, right? Like so many other ascetic movements. And you can go to, if you are lucky enough to live near a nunnery or a monastery, go check it out.
Yeah, get ye to it.
Yeah, we've got a great one near Atlanta, out in Conyers, called Our Lady of the Holy Spirit, and they do not have a loitering law. They have classed it up. They have a nice little bonsai garden. They've got a gift shop and a museum. It's a great day trip. But those,
I still haven't done it, Ben. Can we go together? Can we pledge this year? Maybe the three of us could go together. I would love that.
It's a lovely trip. Yeah, I would do that anytime.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And they've got, anyway, I don't want to rave too much about them, but the modern monks you see are very much not the Templars. Very much not. These guys would actually tangle. At their height, there were 20,000 people, of which, as we said, 10% were what you would call forward line, like warrior monks. And for a while, for a couple of centuries, it was pretty swell to be a Templar. Like you were Mr. Popular. They, like you said, Matt, they become incredibly wealthy. They get super into real estate because they get a lot of spoilers of war. And
you said spoilers of war, which I love. I love as a concept.
Yeah, okay. Spoils of war, but also spoilers. All wars are about resources. Yeah,
the Holy Grail melted faces.
Oh, jeez. So they, so as they are becoming more and more successful, their former allies, the nobility in particular, start to find the nobility and the Catholic Church. They find the Templars increasingly concerning. Yeah.
Well, yeah. When you have that much power, and maybe as another very powerful organization, you're making moves or having to make decisions that aren't popular with this other popular group that is really powerful, that could be bad.
Yeah, and think about it. I mean, this is at a time in history where, sure, of course, the Catholic Church has been around for a while, but I mean, the playing field is a lot more level. With the Templar, they're getting so much power and wealth that they have the potential to even maybe overthrow the papal see or whatever, the Holy See.
Possible secessionism, right? They could move to becoming a state power.
Well, but this is also Game of Thrones stuff, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because you're talking about different kings who are trying to put their hands in religious issues that are coming up to control everything from where the like Pope lives and controls. Like there's a lot going on in history around this time when it comes to the rulers, like the kings.
Who gets to be the Pope, you know?
Yeah.
And, and so you're right. Let's introduce our buddy, Heavy P, aka King Philip IV of France. He's very angry with the Templars as public opinion starts to sour. Rumors begin to spread, you know, like, how did these guys get so successful? How do you become a Templar? What are they really doing in there? What's he building in there? And King Philip totally agrees with these rumors because behind the curtain, behind the throne, he is up to his neck in debt with the Templars. He owes this group money. So when he sees public opinion start to shift in the wind, he leverages it as an attempt to get out of debt the fastest way possible by killing the people that you owe money to.
Well, yeah, but I think his end goal, right, is to take them out or at least remove that organization to which he owes all that money. But he does it in this political intrigue way, guys, with this dude, one of the popes, Pope Clement V. It's a real Littlefinger kind of move, right? The way it plays out, and there's so much detail, we're not going to be able to get into all of it today, but we would highly recommend that you check out Pope Clement V's all the papal bulls he put out and the meetings that he had, because the Templars had a really strong presence in France, like basically looming over the king's shoulder there going, you still owe us a lot of money. And so he got the Pope to make moves against the organization.
Yeah. Because they are talking the talk, right, of following the Catholic Church. Therefore, the Pope should be the highest authority on the planet. And if the Pope says jump, they have to jump. But the Pope is human and is also therefore vulnerable to political pressures or geopolitical pressures. And so Heavy P says, we're going to weaponize these rumors. And he goes to Pope Clement in 1307 and he says, you need to find all the Templars in France and you need to arrest them, get them to confess to these rumors, and then kill them. And the Pope, by the way, later sort of exonerates these guys, but he moves with the wind of King Philip's power. And so it's like a scene in Breaking Bad with all those prison executions happening in 2 minutes. On the morning of Friday, October 13th, 1307, authorities raid the Paris headquarters of the Templars, arrest everyone they find if they don't kill them there, and then they go to every known member's home at the same time and do the same thing. This is not enough for Heavy P. We know this because a few days or a few years later in 1312, like you said, Matt, the escalation through the Pope continues. He says, you as the Pope have to officially disband this order. And so 1312 is commonly considered the official end of the Knights Templar.
Oh, yeah. King Philip IV. One crafty dude.
On paper, though, right? But then the conspiracy thrives that they went underground or that they... Okay.
Yeah, some survived, right? And the practices and knowledge that was associated with being a Templar, right? That kind of secretive stuff near the top. The idea is that got preserved and passed down in some way and probably absorbed into another organization or organizations.
Yeah. And then with that also is the idea that perhaps some of the mysterious artifacts and relics they found had power and that those continued. So the idea is the Templars went underground. They went off the grid. But we got to think about that for a moment, because imagine you're just the average person living there, right? Maybe you have done well enough in life and you were fortunate enough to make a pilgrimage to a holy site in the Middle East or the Levant, and then you were fortunate enough to come back, and you probably had involvement with the Templars if you did those things. And so from your perspective, one of the most popular, powerful forces on earth, as you know it, suddenly becomes public enemy number one and then disappears. As a result, it's no surprise there would be so many bizarre stories and theories about them. Tonight's question, how many, if any, of those stories are true?
Well, we're going to get right into that after a quick word from our sponsors.
Templar-pedic mattress.
Oh, that's fun. That's fun, Ben. I don't dislike that at all.
It does not allow fornication of any sort or marriage sex. Cannot have it on this bed.
But there is a guaranteed human head in every mattress.
Oh, Lord. Wow.
Yeah.
Guys, before we get into this, I just want to give a couple of things for people to search up. And I want to ask you guys about the papal bulls.
Right.
The bulle, I think, is how that would be the plural of that. I didn't know much about this. I think we've mentioned it before on another episode.
We did because I think I just remarked on what a bizarre sounding thing it is, and it's just a declaration, right, or a proclamation, a
decree, right?
Yeah,
public decree by the Pope, whichever
it's like a
one.
fatwa.
Kind of, yeah, but it was always written in like scroll format, and these
very formal
things,
language, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, but the what is it? What were they called? It was the pieces of clay that you would attach, or lead that you would attach to like seal up one of these official writings. Some of the history of that is so fascinating, and I just didn't know any of it before looking into this episode. Look up Vox in Excelso, which is one of these papal bulls, which is the one that was basically like saying, "Hey, Templars, you're done." I'm playing Hogwarts Legacy right now, guys, which is another video game. Sorry. But it sounds like a spell that you would cast. Vox in Excelso.
Patronus Erectum.
Like Cardi B's real name. That's
Wait,
yeah.
what?
It's a wild one. It's a long
I'll give it to you. Cardi B's real name is Belcalis Marletus Cephas, which sounds like a Harry Potter spell.
It is.
Here's where it gets crazy.
Yeah.
There's so many theories, conspiratorial theories about the Knights Templar and what happened to them, right? And it's kind of like if you have friends and you're both fans of a band with a very deep catalog, you end up choosing your own favorite theories or albums, right?
Well, especially if you guys feel it, let's say it's like a David Bowie or something where there are very distinct eras and vibes that, like, I'm a big 80s Bowie fan, or some people are more into like the Eno records or whatever. Not to say they would necessarily disagree over one being better than the other, but a deep catalog sometimes implies blind spots for certain people, and that's certainly the case with these conspiracy theories.
Yeah, let's explore some of the biggest ones. As we said, we're not going to get to everything, folks, because it is pretty dense. We would love to hear your own takes on this. It's kind of like the buffet version of conspiracy folklore. So just stroll around with us tonight, add what you like to your plate. I think maybe the first thing we talk about, the finance conspiracies. Hello? Very interesting, because at least one is true.
Yeah. These guys were financial innovators. Think right now, if you use a bank, right? Let's say you're in the city where you live, and then you have to take a flight to a different city. Let's say somewhere in Minnesota. You land in Minnesota. Your bank probably has a branch in Minnesota near to where you landed, and you could go get money out from that bank, that same bank, from, in a completely different place where you deposited your money, or your company put that money into your bank in some other state, right? That's a given. Easy. That wasn't always the case, right? If you had a bank somewhere, that money was in that bank, that particular place, and you could go get it. Think of it's almost like a security deposit. It's more like that. You can go in and get your money if you need to, but your bank's going to protect it. These guys, the Templars, figured out early on that some people might need to get money in a different place.
Yeah, which led to their success. To set that up, let's note this. Here's the genuine, provable conspiracy. It is that King Philip conspired to wipe these guys out. That is true. That is an actual conspiracy. You might ask yourself, how does a king of all people get in debt with a private group, a private military like the Templars. It's because, 10% are fighters and the rest of them are sort of finance bros.
Dude, this totally reminds me of Game of Thrones stuff. There was the Iron Bank,
The
who
Iron
I believe
Bank,
commanded the Golden Compass, or that's a different thing. The Golden Company, and they were basically a giant militarized group of sellswords that are completely in the pocket of the Iron Bank. That's obviously something George R. R. Martin was very familiar with. This type of history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, like we were saying, you could go to their headquarters in England, the Temple Church in London. You could deposit funds there, and they would issue in exchange a certificate. Sort of a COD, a certificate of deposit. And then you could go on your pilgrimage. If you survived, when you got to Jerusalem, you would exchange that piece of paper for the appropriate amount of money or the value of whatever you deposited way back in England. And this was a huge game changer because pilgrimages, very, very popular after the First Crusade. There's some Christian control of Jerusalem, but it's incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
It's like a 2-month journey if everything works out.
Am I being conspiratorial within the conspiracy to think that there's some inherent grift involved in this? Like, is this fair? Like, were people actually getting their money if they got there? Okay.
Yeah. Minus a percentage.
I see.
Just like your banking
therein
fees.
lies the grift, but that's just the grift of banking. Yeah.
Just like your banking fees now. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can, use all of that money that's in the bank to make loans and all kinds of stuff, which is, again, feels contrary to, the Bible, but whatever.
Whatever.
All that stuff about the money changers and Jesus knocking over the tables and the whatever. Like, it does feel like this is very contradictory to what the teachings of Christ would encourage.
And again, in the beginning, these Templar members are saying, yes, we get a percentage. However, this is not usury because it's not going to us. It's going to the greater good. It's
that's us, though, right? I mean, like you said, this was set apart from the way monasteries worked. The structure of it was much more self-serving, wouldn't you say?
I think it's fair to say it evolved into that over time, right? But in the beginning, they were definitely monastic. Like you would have the basic, the Crusades version of paying your household utilities, and then all the other stuff doesn't go to you. It goes to build another house or to further your aim. And this is a really great and necessary thing for religious pilgrims, Christian pilgrims going to the Holy Land, because those, like the 2 months perfect journey time from Italy to Jerusalem, it almost never happened, because as you traveled, you would run into things like sickness, war, and the constant threat of robbery, all problems which became more severe and more likely the further you got from home. People got jacked all the time. They got robbed all the time because they had to carry a bunch of valuable stuff with them so that they didn't starve on the way. You have to sleep somewhere. You have to eat something. You have to bribe a lot of officials. And these pilgrims, they're not badass monks. They're regular people. So they usually don't have weapons. They might not have security, kind of like herd animals. The best safety they have is numbers. So they try to move in a big unit, and then that just makes the predators evolve.
Yeah. And there's lots of opportunists at the time. And also, it's been a war-torn area that you've got to make your way through to get to Jerusalem, no matter where you're heading from. So, good luck, I guess. Very, very dangerous.
Go with God, literally.
Indeed.
It's a war zone. They are walking through a war zone pretty often. Want to go to Big Think, a great piece by Tim Brinkhoff. He's got a quote that I think sums up just how genius the idea of this remote banking was on the part of the Templars.
Yeah, absolutely. He says, for most European pilgrims, getting robbed was simply a risk they had to take. if they wanted to reach the place where Jesus Christ was believed to have been crucified and resurrected. British travelers, however, had a way to minimize that risk. In London, there was an organization known as the Temple Church, where pilgrims could deposit a portion of their savings. In return, they were given a letter of credit that they could use to withdraw their savings once they reached Jerusalem. So this was literally in response to the rampant muggings, for lack of a better term, that was taken. So this gave people the ability to not have to carry all of their earthly wealth along with them, and that it would be waiting for them on the other end because there was such high demand for making this trip, and it was so perilous. So, the more I think about it, it's a pretty cool service being offered, I would say, you know?
Mm-hmm. And it's also a system that is incentivized to be reliable. So it's because otherwise it's a heck of a trust fall, isn't it? To say, here, I'm going to give you the equivalent of several years worth of everything I've worked for.
Right.
And I just hope the little letter you wrote me matters when I get to this place I've never visited before, a foreign country. This did make the pilgrimage way safer. I mean, sure, people still got robbed all the time and murdered and maimed and assaulted, but there's not really a better defense from a mugging than to not have anything to mug.
Well,
you know what I mean?
And you also have the Templars who are stationed along the routes there who can actually physically defend you, right? Mm-hmm. It's like a little part of the service, a little perk.
Yeah. And, they probably didn't call it this because marketing wasn't what it is today, but they definitely had like premium travelers, like Pilgrimage Plus. Ooh, that's what they would call it, Pilgrimage Plus, where you're the child of a noble family, or you yourself are an aristocrat of some sort. They want to shepherd you through safely, and then later they want to come back to you and say like, hey, yeah, happy with your service, because we would love to not pay taxes. This is, again, all for God, right? We would love a donation since we saved your kid, right, in Jerusalem. And more often than not, the monarchs assented. They said yes.
Yeah. And they had a really good thing going until, as history has shown us, the area, Jerusalem, exchanged hands again, as it would several other times after this. But it was in, 1244, right?
Yeah, 1244. I love that you said sellswords earlier, Noel. Some mercenary armies from modern-day northern Iraq, they come in and they take over Jerusalem. And this is a bloody battle. Like we said, it had already been fortified by the occupying powers. So they paid in blood to overtake the city.
So at this point, the Holy Land is no longer under European control, and European pilgrims, as a result, stopped making those popular pilgrimages. Without those, there was no reason for that system anymore. The one where they placed their savings with the Temple Church, and that caused the holdings of this, let's just call it what it is, holy bank, I guess, to begin to dwindle. So this began to be the start of kind of some cracks forming in the strength and the armor of the old Knights Templar.
Those Khwarezmian mercenaries were the original disruptors, guys.
There we go. Yeah. And they also, I wonder, it's funny. I think mercenaries probably did do surge pricing.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Why not? Dude,
everything that works at a premium, like what's the demand? They don't have a set rate. That doesn't make sense. It's all
this is what sets us apart, a flat fee per city or civilization. No, they totally surge priced.
If I've learned anything from the quests where you have to protect somebody along a route.
I hate escort quests.
I know, they're awful, but they do change. The price, your reward changes depending on the route and the length of time and the number of people you're protecting. I'm just saying.
And the health points of the people at the end.
Hot take, though, guys. I just don't see anything inherently wrong with quote unquote dynamic pricing if it's done within reason and it's tied to supply chain issues like we were talking, or demand. Of course you should be able to charge a little more if your services are more in demand, because you're operating at like a premium, and it's almost like literally a service you're offering to even be available at that time.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway.
No, you're right. I mean, for Pilgrimage Plus, which I've decided to call it, they have like the Templars have to be predictable. They have to be reliable. They have to do what they said they were going to do. And so long as pilgrims keep pilgriming, business is good. To be very soulless about it, we're talking about inelastic demand, right? People are still going to go on pilgrimages. In fact, sometimes the worse stuff gets in Europe, the more likely people are to travel because they want to get right with God.
Well, because you got to get that emerald status of Pilgrimage Plus. You know what I mean?
Ooh, emerald status. Is that better than diamond status?
It is.
It's grail status is better than diamond status.
Yes, sir.
There are a lot of levels to it. So without these pilgrimages, they're still making money, just not as near as much. And they still get a lot of sweetheart benefits from different governments and state powers. They still have a lot of people who owe them money, but one guy who owes the money sees an opportunity. An old heavy P swoops in, suppresses, silences the order, and because they are suppressed, that means it was easy for people to make all sorts of weird claims about them. And these claims grew more extravagant and bizarre over time. There was a lot of vilification, appropriation, like, oh, my thing is the descendant of the Templars. And it teaches us something really common, again, in human dynamics. If you are afraid that someone will not fall for your propaganda, or you're afraid that someone will not stand for, character assassination, then just literally assassinate them or silo them, remove them from the conversation. You can say whatever you want, and it doesn't matter whether it's true. And that's what happened with the Templars. That happens all the time, honestly.
Yeah, all the time. And just as a reminder, Heavy P is King Philip IV of France.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So that's a good note. So we see this suppression. Like, there's a great article in The Conversation by author Patrick Masters, and he says because the Templars were suppressed, there was no one to safeguard their legacy. And then all these other groups came in and said, yeah, well, we're actually the Templars now. Look at me. I'm the captain now of the Templars.
We're not Templars, but we do some of their practices and hold some of their beliefs. And there's a lot of them. And one of the next things we're going to talk about is some of the weirder, maybe religious beliefs and practices of the Templars, because... And again, it's often because of this association with Freemasonry and Masonic orders of the time, right?
Yeah. And a lot of these orders claiming, even today, to be descendants of the Templars, they're not necessarily sinister. They're not like bad guys or whatever. But
I mean, the Shriners, basically put all of their efforts into building children's hospitals and stuff. They just happen to drive tiny little weird cars and wear funny hats. They do a lot of good.
Well, I would say without exception, all of the other orders that, in some way absorbed part of the Templar legacy, they are all at least front-facing service organizations, all of them.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, even the Order of Malta, it's about a hospital, man. It's about providing services and good to the world through our faith, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, through the power of faith, right? And this idea of faith and religion plays a big role because now society, civilization at the time, is confronted with a murder mystery. Right? What happened to this powerful thing? How is it here one day and then the next? The juicier the story, the better. And that leads us to the moment we've all been waiting for, our second ad break. We've returned. Onward to the occult. So this is the stuff you see about Templars in fiction, right? This is all the juicy, like Indiana Jones, Dan Brown, Catholic conspiracy stuff. There are accusations of occult rituals and trafficking with infernal powers. They're saying the people who are, on the front face, supposed to be godly are actually quite the opposite. There's an enemy within. The call is coming from inside the house. And this just kicks off when they arrest everybody, because when they arrest all those folks, they get confessions appearing to confirm all this evil, magic, dark-sided stuff.
You know what you did, you cross peers, you.
Guys, this comes from the stuff that Philip IV got Pope Clement V to do. And it's that Vox in Excelso, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. By the way, my character's name is Duke Wellington in Hogwarts Legacy.
Love it, really love it.
But can I read just a little bit of this? Because this is what they were accused of. And then this is, I think, where all of these rumors come from. This is a reading from Vox in Excelso, a papal decree issued by Pope Clement V on the 22nd of March, 1312. Quote, in view of the suspicion, infamy, loud insinuations, and other things which have been brought against the order, talking about the Templars, and also the secret and clandestine reception of the brother of this order, in view, moreover, of the serious scandal which has arisen from these things, just going on and here we go, danger to faith and souls with the many horrible things which have been done by the very many of the brothers of this order, and it talks about the sin of wicked apostasy, the crime of detestable idolatry, and the execrable outrage of the sodomites. That's when he says, it's not without bitterness and sadness of heart that we abolish the order of the temple. So it's just like the Pope is saying these guys are accused of these horrible things, and this is what they did.
Apostasy is also, it's denying the existence of God. And it is still a crime in some countries. Then also, like you said, the accusations of having same-sex relationships, they got very specific into acts of heresy, spitting, urinating on the cross. So it's just contradicting.
Feels like the kind of stuff that could be, coerced during an act of torture.
100%. It's also, you can tell it's a hit piece because it's contradictory. These folks say there is no God, but then they also believe there is a God enough to defame God's existence.
Yes, that's a very, very good point.
Dude, it's a bully move.
We talked, speaking of bully moves, when they got arrested, right, and pulled from their houses all at the same time in that one big move, it's not like they went to jail and they're like, hey, confess your sins. Well, they got tortured.
Like capital T torture.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Like
this is
no
like
more
Dark
fingernails.
Ages, gnarly torture. Yeah.
No more fingernails, no more teeth, bleed out slowly, kind of gut wound torture.
Rack stretching.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Are you ready to confess yet of all these things we accuse you of? No?
I peed on the cross.
And then the branding, probably an equivalent of waterboarding. Yeah.
Guys, we talk about these sort of extreme torture techniques and how they, lead to unreliable results. But if you ever really put yourself in that situation, wouldn't you not only say whatever they wanted you to say, but maybe even believe it a little bit? Like when your mind and body are just being twisted to that degree, I think I could honestly say it and make myself even believe that I had done it.
There are 4 lights. Star Trek reference. But yeah, you're right. Psychologically, it's a minefield. That's why confessions under duress are so tricky. It's similar to like cult indoctrination, because we've talked about in the past, if you're kept somewhere for hours and hours and hours, even today, and you're just repeatedly gaslit and told the same things, then yeah, you may end up believing it and they don't have to put their hands on you at all. These guys are doing both.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Well, and at the hands of a freaking king that owed the group a ton of money, so he wins either way if you confess or not. Because if you don't confess, you get tortured to death. If you do confess, you get sentenced to, the rest of your life in prison or death.
Mm-hmm. The most dangerous offer. You are going to die. It's up to you how it goes. Yeah. You can make it quick if you tell us why you worship a deity called Baphomet.
Yeah. Okay. So I think everybody who's listening to this knows Baphomet. The most familiar one you've probably seen has the goat head, right? And often is doing the as above, so below motion with the hands and fingers.
But isn't that also a reference to some of the poses that are done in like imagery, like of Christ and religious, figures, where they'll be doing the fingers up, like the sort of peace sign? But this one is like, one of them is inverted. Isn't that right?
Are you accusing Christian symbolism of not being entirely original?
Well, yeah.
No, you're right, though. I agree. You're absolutely right, Noel. There's a book from 1987, which is pretty great, called The Knights Templar and Their Myth. And the author, Peter Partner, which gave me a hard time still. Yeah. Nominative determinism, anybody?
Pen name.
Yeah, pen name, partner name. He says that in some of the trials of the Templars, both as individuals and as a group, the main charge, like the big problem, was that they were not worshiping God. They were worshiping a different thing. This is where the idolatry comes in. They were worshiping an idol in the form of a head, and it was called Baphomet. And Baphomet is interesting because the Templars never talk about this before the trial. There's not one piece of writing, documentation, internal or external, wherein they ever mention this thing. So the argument then is that they never mention it because it is such a secret, because they are Satan worshipers.
Posh.
But hold on. There is some intrigue here. Well, at least, I don't know. Tell me if you guys are intrigued by this. But physical places like Bagris Castle, a place in Turkey, it's literally a castle up on a hill where you can look all the way over into Syria, and a strategic position like that, you can see the Mediterranean Sea, you can see any armies that are coming your way, right? In this castle that was controlled by a bunch of different groups over time, but the Templars controlled it for a while. There are all of these hidden tunnels and passageways and secret places within that castle that they controlled. That it's been, I guess it's an accusation. It's a mystery as to some of the writings and carvings and stuff that were found in there. Some of the things that were considered secret. A lot of it you can't point to and say, hey, there's definitely this whatever. You can't say there's a Baphomet in there in the, third corridor from the bottom or whatever. But there is weird stuff with some of the places they controlled that do seem to hint at some different worship than what would be described.
That's interesting. But aren't secret rooms and passages sort of a staple of the Masons and of these types of orders?
Well, they're good for a siege, right? Regardless of your belief, it's nice to have a place to squirrel away or a secondary exit that no one knows about. And that's part of it. But also in some of these locations, to be clear, it's like they moved into a house where someone else had lived. So the question is, did the worship stay as well, right? Did they introduce this? Were they just around it? This leads to what I think too, and I think we're on the same page, is the most fascinating possibility about the occult conspiracy stuff. So first we have to say the confessions that were derived under torture do not seem uniform. Some folks were saying, I don't know what you're talking about. Some folks were like, oh my gosh, leave me my other foot. I'll agree to whatever. And they're like, tell us about the idol. And in each case, they told a different story about the idol, about its appearance. It was a cat, a head with three faces, a regular old severed head. And then it gets even weirder, to your point, Matt, because the Templars probably did have a couple spare severed heads laying around. That is true. It's just like, how did they treat the severed heads?
I do also see potential motivation for turning away from traditional Christian beliefs in that they were railroaded by the church in such a hardcore way.
But again, like, it's weird because all of that kind of happened relatively at the same time, right? And they were being persecuted for their previously held beliefs. Like, that's why they got railroaded. At least allegedly, according to the Pope and the King of France. So it is weird. It is a weird thing about that. But let's get back to the heads, Ben, because this is, I didn't know this, but severed heads, like it was an okay thing to keep them around.
Yeah.
You just had to treat them.
Reliquaries. Yeah. Like this saint is very important to us. So we're keeping the head as a object of adoration. Right. And still it's still in the milieu of Christianity. It is normalized.
So you mummify
it?
Kind of, right?
Yeah. Or just boil it out until until no soft matter remains and it's a skull, and then put some like silver, precious metals around it. Pop a couple jewels in the eyes. Just make it, zhuzh it up.
Cool.
Nothing weird. Nothing weird. They probably had the head of, or the claims were they had the head of a Saint Euphemia. They also quite possibly had the head of their other co-founder, the first Grand Master of the Templars, Hugh Depends. It sounds like huge depends to us. But they did. Okay, so here's what's interesting to me. This is a little bit like Heart of Darkness, Colonel Kurtzy stuff. But we know proximity breeds familiarity in all things. Is it possible that some of these guys spent so long in these other parts of the world that they naturally, through cultural osmosis, began to pick up traditional beliefs? That's not a one-on-one, or that's not a 1-2 switch. That's not a yes-no thing. That's a gradual increment, right? Because you're increasingly not practicing your vow of poverty, nor of chastity. You're getting a little closer with the local population.
Yeah, but isn't there some kind of weird translation thing here that was all I read?
Baphomet?
I read that Baphomet could have actually stood for like worship of Muhammad, or turned into, converted maybe to Islam. And they had changed sides basically in the big religious war.
The calls coming from in the house.
Mm-hmm.
Did you find anything about that? Because that's what it seems like it could be. But again, I don't know.
Yeah. And it's tough because it's under torture, right? But I agree with you. It does feel like a possible thing. There's a book from 1865 by Thomas Wright called The Worship of Generative Powers. Ooh. And I think with a quote from this, a quotation from this, we'll see that comparison of Baphomet as sort of a code for worshiping Islam, or practicing, I should say, Islam. And it's interesting. I think we can unpack it. Who's got a good, like, old-timey voice for this?
Let's see. Josserand de Montpesson, a knight of Provence, said that their superior showed him an idol made in the form of Baphomet. Another, named Raymond Rubai, described it as a wooden head on which the figure of Baphomet was painted, and adds that he worshipped it by kissing its feet and exclaiming, Yalla! Which was, he says, verbum sacrosenorum, a word taken from the Saracens. A Templar of Florence declared that in the secret chapters of the order, one brother said to the other, showing the idol, adore this head. This head is your God and your Muhammad.
Not Baphomet, Muhammad.
But spelled like a combo meal of like Baphomet and Muhammad, kind of. It's very interesting.
Hey, Yallah? Doesn't that sound familiar?
That's what I'm saying. And it's also like, we also know that Mahomet was an old French word that was a stand-in for the Prophet Muhammad, the founder of Islam. So now there's a political as well as a religious bent. The reasoning is these monsters are supposed to support Christianity, but they've been perverting our trust. They're worshiping the enemy the whole time. And a lot of times, to be completely honest, literacy about other religions was not a thing. So the average person in Western Europe is like aware that Islam is a thing by this point, but they don't know what it entails, right? They haven't read the Quran. They don't know about Ramadan or anything like that. So they just know they consider these folks to be a largely hostile force. And with that preconception, kind of anything bad you say about them sounds really believable.
Yep.
Which again happens today all the time, right?
But guys, worship a head as your god.
This is your god now.
Going blue, I see.
Yikes.
Oh
dear. Oh dear.
But you know, it is. I don't know. Maybe
weird.
It's fine.
I'm sure it's all very above board. but yeah, so they're accused of, you know, like you said, switching sides. The idea that their long occupation of these strategic sites in the Holy Land had led to them corrupting their own beliefs. And this happens as the weird thing is their beliefs had become corrupted. They were making a lot of money. The vows of chastity were increasingly irrelevant, right? They weren't living the letter of the Templar rule. So it's not too far of a jump in the court of public or papal opinion to say, what else? What else did they violate? And so we still know there's a lot of mystery around those practices, but I gotta say, confession under torture, like we have all pointed out at some point in this episode, confession under torture doesn't yield results.
Yeah.
If you're looking for the truth.
Yeah. Oh man, you're right. Is it okay to switch to this next part is, I think, my favorite maybe set of theories. And it's something we've talked about before. It goes back to Gnosticism, spelled with a G.
Ooh, yeah. Shout out Yaldabaoth and Sophia, huh?
Dude. Maybe let's lay down some groundwork here. There's some interesting concepts within schools of Gnosticism about God that don't really vibe with maybe the teachings of the Catholic Church and what the Templars are supposed to be following. But it does make me think about my own internal spiritual stuff going on when reading Old Testament verses recently. Just looking at the God of the Old Testament as this jealous, dangerous, scary thing. The Gnostics maybe kind of agreed with that view a little.
Yeah. The spoiler for Gnosticism, folks. The idea is that there are two different kind of planes of existence. And the one that you are hearing this podcast in is the crap one. It's the material world. And just like Madonna, you're forced to live in this material world.
Oh, there's also a line from a Police song it says, "We are spirits in the material world. Our spirits in the material world." I guess that's I think that must be a reference to that. Sting's a pretty philosophically minded fellow.
Well, that's a concept that goes throughout a bunch of... What? Sorry, Ben.
He loves some tantra, you know?
It's good stuff. It's good stuff. But this concept, it goes throughout a bunch of different religions, right?
Yeah.
All that we experience is one thing, but really your goal and the stuff you should be focused on is in that other realm, the spiritual realm that you get to access once you die. It's where you were before you were born. Very common thing. But just with the Gnostics, it's that a lot of the teachings about these creatures that are gods, that are the all-powerful ones, are actually evil forces. The ones that are trying to make you focus, I don't know, in some way on what you're doing here.
Yeah, the idea is you're not just stranded in the less cool reality, the material world. You're in a hostage situation, and everybody is being held back. In Gnosticism particularly, or in this kind of, the general vibe of Gnosticism is that the thing you think is God of this material world is a prison warden, more likely, is a false god. His name's Yaldabaoth, and he's an absolute pill. And you have to, through Gnosticism, learn how to get around this dude and lead a better life, and then ultimately graduate to, the better universe. The Catholics don't like this.
No, and the Templars got accused of having association with or being secret Gnostics, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that somewhere delving too deep into the desert, they had discovered unclean things, and those unclean things had turned them. And it's weird because later you see this accusation play out in a much more credible way with the Cathars. The Cathars, a heretical Gnostic movement, also brutally suppressed and persecuted by the church. So it's like, it may sound, in an increasingly secular civilization, it may sound like these are silly reasons to torture and kill people. But
yeah, guys, it makes me think about old school Invisible College stuff, that we love in fiction, that stuff that actually goes back to theoretical secret writings. And it just makes me think about all of the human beings that have existed throughout the rule of these military, almost state level hegemonic powers that were also religions, and the just human beings that are exploring the world and thoughts and having individual thoughts that would be considered heresy, and then writing them somewhere and keeping them secret because no one can know that you even had these thoughts.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And especially if you find other people that are kind of into your idea, you got to keep that stuff secret, or else your head is literally going to roll. And it does just make me wonder about, again, not necessarily even truths, right? Or actual religious movements or spiritual, again, truths, but like just thoughts about the world and what it could be and how it could function outside of those rigid structures that these religions have. I'm fascinated by that stuff. And I know you guys are too. I think we should go even deeper into that realm at some point.
Yeah, let's do it, because check out our episodes or various things we did on the Illuminati. A lot of their the actual Illuminati, a lot of their conversations were about science and spiritualism.
Yeah.
Like they were hiding because they had to, because power structures kill intelligent, innovative people.
Yikes.
I mean, that's true. Like there's, to your point, Matt, somebody might write a treatise on gravity, right? Or the passage of the heavens, and they're not making any crazy heretical claims like directly confronting the current view of God. They're just saying, here's my How Stuff Works article. And I have to hide it because a church will come after me because they feel like what I am saying about physics is contradicting the spiritual view of the universe.
Heck, we joke about, folks coming after us or having, interns listening into our calls from the NSA or what have you. But at the end of the day, there's nobody shutting down any of the things that we're saying. And we pretty much are able to have open discourse about and not necessarily tribute, from for the most part.
Dude, Ben, do you think there's a secret vault of How Stuff Works articles somewhere that you can access if you had the right URL?
You're talking about How Stuff Works After Dark?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a different thing, I thought.
That's a different thing. It's a different thing, but related.
Things get hot
and
heavy.
Yeah, we were all very into Cinemax for a second.
And Sting.
And Sting. Stingamax.
Is he a gooner or an edger? What do you think? And what's the difference?
I don't know.
Well, gooning is together in a group.
Is it though?
That's what Robert Evans told me.
Wow.
And he
were
went
you
out
guys
of it.
Together in a group?
No, we were recording a show, and he went out of his way to explain it to me. But very nice guy.
Brings new meaning to the Goonies.
I don't think it necessarily has to be in a group. I think it's just another form of like tantric. It's supposed to result in a hypnotic trance-like state. I thought it was in a group too, but then I don't know. It's one of these things that I guess evolves. Gooning is a form of legal kidnapping. Oh, that's not right.
No,
that's different. That's
and
different.
Also, we're looking at weird websites. So again, goodbye to our search history. But yeah, folks, you'll have to ask Robert. And maybe the meaning is your own to give.
I think that's right. Hey, it's living language,
Yeah, right. And churches hate it. But this maybe gets us to, because we're closer to the modern day. Before you get to that question, I kind of have to ask, like, I agree, there's much more to get into. But if, like, I think our mutually favorite conspiracy theories are true, if the Templars really did discover magic, really did traffic with infernal powers, and if they found some genuine supernatural artifact, the Holy Grail, head of a deity, Ark of the Covenant, etc., if that magic worked, then why didn't it save them? You know what I mean? Like, if you have found the spiritual equivalent of a nuclear bomb, why didn't it detonate? That makes me think it's a little more of a heavy P King Philip hit piece. But maybe we end today with the idea that we set up earlier. Did the Templars go away? Is there, like, the Freemasons are often very closely associated with the Templars.
Yeah. There's one person we can ask you guys.
Who's that?
He goes by Friar John T. Dunlap. He's the Grand Master of the Sovereign Military Order of Malta. I think we can ask him. He's been the Sovereign Grand Master since 2023, May 2023.
Oh, okay. He's still got that new car smell.
Oh, right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. But he knows. He knows something.
Definitely, what that is. We'll have to figure out how to ask him the right way. There's so much is in how we phrase the question. But yeah, he would probably know. I wonder if he would agree with historian Frank Sinello. In 2003, Sinello writes a book called The Knights Templars, God's Warriors, the Devil's Bankers.
Oh.
Yeah. And he says that it goes back to marketing and promo and propaganda, because he's like, look, if you travel back in time, there's a guy named Andrew Ramsey. He is a high-level French Freemason, and he originally says, hey, Freemasons are descended from the Crusades. They're descended from the Order of the Knights Hospitaller. And then he realizes, oh, that order is still around. They can come back and tell me, or tell the public, that I'm making this up. So he quickly changes his story. And he says, oh, did I say Hospitaller? I meant the Templars, because
nobody can check. Them. Yeah, nobody can check that out.
And I think that's informing a lot of these, bit more fanciful claims. But again, because of the mystery, because they were not all individually murdered, we don't know what happened. And I think that's why, like the Da Vinci Code and all these other Assassin's Creed, I think that's why Templars are a regular recurring thing in fiction.
Oh yeah. The Freemason lore stuff that goes back to descending deep into the earth to pull out stone and discovering things within the earth, that still stirs something within me, gets me all tingly and excited.
Hermetic influences, Tubal Cain, and all that jazz.
Oh man, it just gets. I really love it. And I liked the idea that somehow the Templars were connected to that. But it's a really good point.
I do think it's cool too. Shout out to Fox Mulder, right? The truth is out there. We want to believe, and if you can inform us, if you can, give us the scoop, just like you would with a casual stranger who asks you a question, then we would love to hear your take. We also want to point out that there is an official kind of descendant of the Templars that everybody agrees is descended from them. It's the Order of Knights in Portugal, the Order of the Knights of Jesus Christ, created in 1319 because the Templars played a big role in creating the Kingdom of Portugal. And the Pope approved this. The Pope was like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, and that was in 1319, which is not long after the Templars got...
Right, and Michael Haig basically referred to this as the Templar under another name.
Mm-hmm. But loyal to the King of Portugal.
That's right.
Right.
Little twist.
Mm-hmm.
But again, there's just weird... Again, it goes back to the Order of Malta for me. Just the way lands have been gifted to some of these orders. They all feel like political moves because so many of this group, including the Templars before, I don't know anything about the Order of the Knights of Jesus Christ, but the Order of Malta, these are people who have to prove their lineage back to nobility in order to even join often, which just feels like this weird interconnected power thing.
It is. I mean, very much so. It would be, while it may not be correct to assume that conspiracy theories about secret cabals are all automatically true, it would likewise be naive to assume that those very connected people don't speak with each other. You know what I mean? Like, you recognize what your neighbors look like. And in the world of power, those folks are neighbors. They see each other.
Dude. It's taking me back to the Project for New American Century and feeling like there's some kind of weird crusade thing going on in the Middle East again in the 2000s.
Oh, like when, was it Bush who used the phrase crusade and then realized he had to walk that one back real quick?
Oh, yeah.
Dude,
I
like
think
700 years later, just let's do it again. Let's see what happens.
I have no doubt that there are certain members of certain extreme religious communities that would like nothing better.
Yeah, terrorists too. Like Anders Breivik, I think his name was. He saw himself as a new Templar, as a new Crusader. But again, a lot of folks who have some sort of historical association or maybe ancestry, a lot of these folks who are in organizations that claim to have descended from the Templars, they're not bad. They like a good story, like almost anybody else. But there is a conspiracy at play, and it's a conspiracy about money. That's why they got wiped out.
Dude, money and power.
Yeah, first you get the money, then you get the power, then King Philip comes for you. I think that's how the Little Kim song goes, right?
Yeah, that's it.
They got ill-poped. So with that, I think we've set up some episodes we want to explore in the future. But we also want to hear from you. Guys, how cool would it be if a Templar wrote to us, like an actual Templar?
Oh, from their secret underground bunker temple?
Send a picture of the head.
Please do.
Oh, wow.
The deity.
Thank you for the clarification.
We really do want to hear from anybody out there who's a member of an organization that within that organization, it finds ties to Templars or to orders, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you believe it or whatever. It's just, does the order find its roots there somehow?
Is it part of their lore?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. We would love to hear that. Also want to go ahead and thank the people who took us up on sending your pet pictures. Going to go through some of those later today. And, if you've got a topic in your head, something just burning that you want your fellow conspiracy realists to learn about, then let us know that too. Or just send us puns. We're open. We're easier to talk to than the Templars of old. We try to be easy to find online.
Boy, do we ever. You can find us at the handle Conspiracy Stuff, where we exist on Facebook, YouTube, where we have video content rolling at you every single week, as well as X, FKA Twitter. On Instagram and TikTok, we're Conspiracy Stuff Show.
We also have a phone number. You can leave us a voicemail. Call 1-833-STDWYTK. When you call in, give yourself a cool nickname. Let us know if we can use your name and message on the air, and say whatever you like. You got 3 minutes. If you don't want to do that or you have too much to say, why not instead send us a good old-fashioned email? We are
conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.